Welcome, Andy.
Hello, Karen. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And you've just been playing golf. God, you're making me bloody jealous. I'm looking outside the window and beautiful day. I've been stuck on my computer all day, and you're like, oh, I just went and played golf. It's beautiful.
Well, I did just confide in you that it's the worst I've hit the ball in years, and I had an absolute stinker of a round. So I actually got halfway through, and I said, I'd actually rather be at work right now, fellas.
Oh well, that makes me no, it doesn't make me feel better. But yeah, what a great opportunity though to be. I think we miss this. That we think we've got to work hard and work hard and work hard, and we forget that we've got to spend some time out in the sun. And I'm not sort of trying to get people to get skin cancer, that sort of stuff. But just get out and enjoy the fresh air, and particularly if you can do it with some friends, that's beautiful.
Yeah, took me a long time to learn this, Karen, but I think, looking after yourself and
Yeah,
just putting yourself first sometimes. Yeah, what I found and along my business journey is that you do get caught on that hamster wheel and you're sort of running for the sake of it sometimes. And sometimes you step off and take a moment just to look after yourself, spend some time with your mates, walk around and swear at a golf ball for a few hours. And, it just makes you realize that you have to just do whatever makes you happy sometimes and not let society or the hamster wheel dictate what you should do every day. And I think
Mm,
yeah, it took me a long time to learn. As I said, I paid the price for making bad decisions for years, but now that I've discovered that, it's being out in nature for me, like I have to do it a couple of times a week. It just keeps me grounded and keeps me
yeah,
thinking about, the why we do what we do and why
yeah,
we exist.
yeah. And you say, that you took you a long time to learn, but we're not taught that. You go back to school and think about that. We're taught to compete. We're taught to work hard. You won't get a job if you don't get work hard and all that.
Yeah.
No one's sitting there saying to us, "I know you've got to look after your well-being. Make sure I suppose they do. They say go outside and play with your friends, but I think that's just to piss us off. I think that's
Yeah.
get us out of their
Right.
way.
Yeah, and what I found along our business journey, like we started with nothing, we ended up with quite a large business getting acquired and went through that whole business life cycle. And I kind of just got to a point where I was expected to strive every day. And don't get me wrong, there were times where I probably strove as much as anyone to achieve everything I possibly could in the day. And I just wanted to wring the neck out of life and build an
Yeah,
epic business. But I'm really just at a stage now where I feel comfortable with what I've achieved, and I'm only 42. It's not like I'm retired, but I think sometimes, now I'm at a stage in life where I'm actually a little bit content with what I've done for the time being, and I just want to live a good life. I got three boys that are
yeah,
14, 12, and 10, and tomorrow I'm taking the day off, and one of my boys is competing in divisional cricket against the
yeah,
rest of Gippsland, and being able to take a day off on a Wednesday and go and watch him play cricket, like he'll remember that when he moves out of home and grows
yeah,
up and has his own kids.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and our business was very demanding, and my family sacrificed a lot for the business. So fortunate enough to have enjoyed great success and now be able to make my own choices. And
mm,
it's interesting. The people I talk to who maybe built a big business and sold it in the same position that I was in, a lot of them go on and just stay in
yeah,
that corporate space and they work hard every day. And I do think it's like a hamster wheel. And
mm,
like, if that's what they love and that's what gives them meaning, then that's great. But when you really drill into it, sometimes I feel like people are just expected to keep striving instead of actually saying, does this make me happy?
mm,
Um, and I'm not tone deaf. I'm aware of the fact that I'm able to make decisions in my life that, financially that other people couldn't make. Like
yeah,
everyone
yeah,
would love to take Tuesday off and go and play golf. But,
yeah.
we did the hard work. We front loaded a lot of that effort, the stress, the sacrifice. And at some point, I just thought now it's time to pay the family back and also to look after my own health and well-being a bit more.
Hmm. Oh, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think it's I know, you know what? I know you say that you're in a lucky position and not everyone's got that choice privilege, and I get it. I do get that. But I do also think it's a mindset thing as well. Do we can take time. We can go for a walk after work. We can play with the dogs after work, or we can go for a swim. Like there are the
Yeah.
options, but I think we tell ourselves a story that we're too busy, too busy, too busy, can't do it, can't do it. And I,
Yeah.
I know so many people terribly that have retired and then died.
Yeah.
Because they busted their ass and then suddenly they got no purpose or no, they don't know what to do in life. And
Yeah.
what a shame. What a
Yeah. Yeah. It is sad. And I think, the other thing that I've really noticed in life is a lot of people that are sort of metaphorically dying a little bit every day. Like
yeah,
they've got the victim mentality. I just have no time for it in life
yeah,
because you always have control over your environment more than what you
yeah,
want to allow yourself to believe. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you have the ability largely to make your own choices. And I just see people that are really not happy and don't do anything about it year after year,
Yeah.
and they'll find external factors why they can't do anything about it. I'm just like, that's BS. Like you
Yeah.
actually do have more choices than what you allow yourself to think sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations in life where I just wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And so one day I just wake up and go, well, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to go and do something about it. And
Yeah.
often it will involve a big financial setback or making a sacrifice in some way. But if I'm not happy, then what's the point?
Right. I agree. I agree with you. I'm always questioning that, always weighing that up. Something's niggling at me. What is it? And I'll dump it, or I'll get rid of it, or I'll just because it's not worth it. It's
No.
not like sometimes we can't identify it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect at it because I know sometimes I have niggles and I think, what the hell is it? But I don't want to sit in victim mindset either. I want to dig, dig, dig till I find what the hell's bloody niggling at me and then piff it off. Anyway,
Yeah, it's true.
enough
Yeah.
of that. Andy, it's just back onto your story. Right now, you're a business leader, mentor, business coach, public speaker, investor in startups, and an author. So you've got quite a lot going on. So when you say work, you still get your hand in a lot, fingers in a lot of pies. But you are the founder of Gippsland Solar, and so which was eventually acquired, I think 9 years later or something by RACV Solar. Uh, so, but tell us about what got go back. What got you into solar? Were you a kid at school that was playing with solar panels or tinkering with little Dick Smith electronic things or anything like that?
No, not at all. I was really just a kid looking for trouble, to be honest,
Ah,
everywhere I went. I'm not going to lie to you, Karen. And if you read anyone that's read the book will know. And because my kids were going to have to read this book, I probably didn't include all of the gory details about my upbringing. Um, in fact, I was actually reading my own book with my son. He chose to read it with me the other night, laying
yeah.
in bed, and he got to the end of chapter 2, and he's like, "Oh, you're a bit of a jerk, weren't you, Dad?"
I
And I
love
said, and I said, mate, you don't know the stuff that didn't make the book. But that is really the story of my first, say, 18 years on this earth. Like for those that have struggled with ADHD or some sort of neurodivergence, through the early 90s, you would know that there wasn't a lot of respect or understanding
yeah,
of it as a condition or an illness of some
yeah,
kind.
yeah,
You were really just kind of put in a corner and treated as a bit of a troublemaker. And
yeah.
I always knew there was something that was different about me, and I really struggled to fit in. Like I didn't have a wolf pack anywhere I went,
Mm,
um, and that feeling of being uncomfortable or feeling unwelcome or lonely in an environment, I'm sure many people can relate to that. It's an awful
yeah,
feeling,
yeah.
um, and I had that for years, and I had the crap beaten out of me as a kid, like at school. Like
Oh,
I was such an easy target because I was always in trouble. And I would actually do my work like in half the time, and then the teacher would tell me to sit there and just mind my own business.
yeah.
Now we know you don't tell a kid with ADHD to sit there and mind their own business because they'll just cause trouble. And mum and dad couldn't afford much more in the way of a good education or a good school for me. So I was dealt those cards, and by the stage that I turned 16 or 17, I'd been pretty much kicked out of school before the end of year 10. I'd been kicked out of home half a dozen times to whoever would take me, actually, at that point, family or friends. Found myself in a bit of trouble with the law, to be honest, like things that I'm not really proud of at all. I carry a bit of shame about, but it was just me trying to find the way to channel this fierce energy, this passion that was just like burning inside me every day.
Mm,
And I used, because I couldn't find anywhere where I fit in, I just started acting out. And um, it actually was that moment when I was 19, I found myself working in a job selling deep cycle batteries. And
yeah.
someone asked me for a way to charge it. And I worked out I could buy a solar panel for $800 and sell it for 1,100. And I thought, oh, this seems like a good idea, and helped him to connect the solar panel.
Yeah.
And then it was that quick and that visceral, that moment where I connected up the solar panel, and it just all came to life. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is my mission. And
Wow.
25 years later, it's still the thing that drives me.
Wow. I love it. I love it. There's a lot of stuff in that. But one thing I really love what you're saying is we've just been talking about the victim mindset, and you Yeah, saying being bullied at school, being bashed up, shut down, sit down, mind your own business, blah blah blah, always getting in trouble. You could have said, you know, well, like a lot of people have. I was always in trouble at school. Any wonder I'm in jail?
Yep.
Any wonder I don't have a job. Any wonder, it was all my parents' fault. Like because I hear a lot of that shit, and
Yeah.
you're absolute. You're a real case study that if you don't take that on and you do follow your passion, you do have success. You can have success.
Yeah, look, I have to say that's probably, other than this passion for accelerating the energy transition, this is the thing that really drives me now is working with kids, normally kids, those ages from 13 to 17, for people like me that didn't fit in a box and didn't feel like they belong.
Yeah,
It is a superpower, and I did come to learn that, and most people do, but there was a period of time where everyone was worried about where I would end up. And
yeah,
all of the people that I associated with, the only ones that would accept me into their group in school, most of them are in jail or committed suicide or in pretty awful situations in their lives. And that was the path that I was probably headed on, to be frank.
mm,
Um, and I'm so fortunate that I found renewables because that became my salvation. But I mean, who knows? It could have been something else. I could have pulled an engine apart and put it back together one day and gone, this is my purpose.
mm,
Um, Everybody just needs to find that thing to channel their energy into.
mm.
And then from that moment on, I think your mission and your purpose become clear, and then life becomes a little bit easier, I feel, from that point on.
Yeah, but I also think when you're saying it could have been solar, it could have been mechanics. It's probably that you felt so good. It's probably that you for once in your life you felt like, oh my God, I'm a success. And
Yeah.
that fueled your, I want more of this. I want more of this good feeling. When you were when you lit up that solar panel or lit up for the first time, it was like, wow, bang,
Yeah.
did you have any idea how important the renewable energy sector would be or was? Like, was it just a grand idea? This works and I can make money and I feel good. Or did you have some inkling that it was something for the future?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure been asked that question specifically before. The one thing I have always been honest about is that I was never a dyed-in-the-wool environmentalist. It was never
Mm,
something that, to be honest, was a strong passion of mine. I didn't really care as much as what I do now, certainly.
mm,
So it wasn't that. I was always obsessed with business. I don't know. There was something
yeah,
about, because mum and dad had no money, and I wanted to buy the latest and greatest of everything to find a way to try to manufacture a
yeah,
sense of self-importance or to fit in. I saw having a job or being in business as a way to allow me to purchase the things in life that mum and dad couldn't afford for
yeah.
me. So, like, I think I had my first job. I started my own business when I was 11, making scones and selling them around the neighborhood.
I
So,
love that.
yeah, and it was good. It was the best business I ever ran because mum bought all the ingredients and she paid
Yeah,
the electricity bill to cook them. And
you got all
so
the money.
no cost of goods sold. It was very profitable business. And I was getting $10 for six scones with jam and cream. I think mum paid for the jam and cream. Um, and so from that moment all the way through my teenage years, I was always trying to find a way to start a business, to create new income streams. It was just something that interested me. And so I didn't see the size of this renewable
Yeah,
energy transition and the
yeah.
meaningful sort of scale of it. But there was something I knew I was getting onto something really special.
Mm,
For me, it was just like it's just so obvious. When I started finding new applications for solar panels, it was water pumps and electric fences, or
yeah.
like you used to have farmers that were running 500 meters of cabling in a trench to power a little pump on a pontoon for a dam.
Yeah,
Or you
yeah,
can just buy a solar panel for $500 and it just sits there and powers it for free with no
yeah,
moving parts forever almost.
yeah,
And I just thought, like, this is obvious that we should be doing more of this.
yeah,
And that's what drove me, is that it was just so simple and so obvious to me that I felt like it just had to become more
yeah,
meaningful part of our world.
yeah. So when you were not knowing, not knowing the really big picture there, and you were working for someone else, what made you decide to go out on your own? Like, what was it that you thought, God, I could do this on my own. I don't need to work
Um,
for anyone.
Yeah, look, I was very headstrong. I think it's pretty clear.
Obvious.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't shy away from that. It served me well in life, but I just always had a very strong belief in what I thought was the right thing to do. I think ethically and morally as well at
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
but also just good business strategy. Like I could see, I don't mean to sound arrogant about it, but maybe at times I feel like I could see opportunity coming, and the person I was working for just did not agree, and they wouldn't back me in, they
Mm,
wouldn't invest in it. And I'd be like, God, why can't you see what I see right
mm,
now? And so eventually you realize that the only way to truly satisfy your urge is to go off and try it yourself and maybe fall on
mm.
your backside a few times, but just go and do things that, make the decisions you want to make in every
Yeah.
day in every aspect, and then test those theories within your own business. I would never have been satisfied working for someone else forever. And maybe it sounds a bit disloyal, but through those teenage years, I was quickly jumping between jobs. I would do something to a point where I felt like I had nothing really more to learn or to
Yeah. Yeah.
develop. And then I
Yeah.
was like, okay, now I need to move on and find something else to add more strings to my bow. And
Yeah.
I was I was always of the belief that if I was going to run my own business, I need to have all of the different elements of running a business. I need to have experience in doing all of those things. I don't need to be the expert in them, but I need to understand them
Yeah.
intrinsically.
Yeah.
And then it just got to a point where I was like, nowhere I go, I can't find the satisfaction,
Mm.
and I don't agree with the way they're running the business. So then eventually I just went, well, it's time for us to branch out and do our own thing, and obviously worked out pretty well.
Well, it did work out pretty well. It could have gone the other way, but lucky for your headstrong attitude. You were married when you decided to go, start Gippsland Solar. What did Kelly say? Did did you have any backing? Did she have a job? Was it safe, or were you just sort of going, I'm gonna put us all on a, bloody roller coaster ride and see what happens?
Yeah, it wasn't a very smart decision on paper, Karen. I will share that with you. But we just returned from 5 or 6 years of living overseas, traveling around the world, and just we were flat broke a dozen times, probably more.
Yeah,
S- Living off the smell of an oily rag. I rang mum from Brazil one day and asked her to pay my car rego because we didn't have enough money to get through to the end of the trip. We were just
yeah,
every time we had a few $1,000s in the bank, we were gone. We were on a plane somewhere backpacking around.
yeah,
And when we moved back to Melbourne and then Kel fell pregnant, we decided we didn't want to live in the city. We wanted to move to, the
yeah.
country to raise a family because that's what Kel's upbringing was like. And in the end, Kel convinced me that her life in Gippsland, just outside the Latrobe Valley, was a great place to raise a family, and I was all in and moved here for lifestyle, and then realized that in 2010 in the Latrobe Valley that it was the worst place in the world to start a solar business. I hadn't thought about the work component. I just moved there because I wanted to build a life for our family, and I couldn't find a job.
Oh, but
So
were you already? Did you already have your own business then? Like, had you
no,
started?
no,
Oh, okay.
no.
So, no,
So I've been working for two or three different solar companies in Melbourne. I
yeah,
actually tried to convince one of those companies to let me open a franchise of their business in the
yeah.
Latrobe Valley, and he came up, he brought it up on Google Maps, and he saw 50 kilometers, a square kilometer of a hole in the ground from the coal-fired power stations. And went, "You're an idiot, mate." So he dismissed my idea out of hand, and so I quit. And then I think I spoke to the two solar companies that were existing and reasonably successful in Gippsland at the time, and
Yeah,
neither of them had any intention of expanding and putting a salesperson on.
yeah.
And I came home, and I think Cal was 7 months pregnant, commuting to Melbourne twice a week at 5 o'clock in the morning, like doing it tough.
Wow.
Um, and I said to her, I said, I've checked out every opportunity in the solar industry in Gippsland. I really want to stay in this industry, but there's no jobs. And Cal, quick as a flash, she said, well, if there's no jobs and there's no competition, maybe we should start our own solar business.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That was it. So thanks, Cal. That was a good idea.
But not at first. But
No,
tell
it
us.
worked out well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know it has worked out well now. Well, I love the story about you working for your brother-in-law or something. I can never get the story right, but working for your mate or something, pretending to be a carpenter while you were setting yourself up. I tell the story. Go on, Andy. I love it. It's
Yeah.
that's my
Well,
favorite thing.
I had this fierce belief that we could build a really epic solar business and change the world. And after the first 12 months, I realized that the Latrobe Valley, most people didn't see it that way. And so there was no social license. Solar didn't
Mm,
make financial sense. It was only for people that had an environmental
Yeah.
bent as well, which there wasn't
Yeah.
many of those in the valley back in those days.
Yeah.
And so, although I had this unwavering belief in what we could achieve, come the winter of 2011, the phone just stopped ringing. And for those who live in Gippsland and are familiar with the climate,
Yeah.
it's not exactly bathing in solar in
Yeah.
Gippsland during the winter.
Yeah.
And so the phone stopped ringing. The debts were piling up. Kel was still, I think at that stage we had a 12-month-old at home, so Kel wasn't able to go back to work and
Uh,
just couldn't pay the bills. And so I had to just take a swallow a pragmatism pill and put the business into hiatus and go and get a job as a carpenter. A mate of mine landed me a plum job building a secondary school gym down in Leongatha.
yeah.
And he lied and said that I had 10 years experience as a carpenter. And he got me in on such a sweet wage. It was amazing. So I was very fortunate. But then I didn't even have a tool belt. I didn't have a Stanley knife or a tape measure. I didn't have anything. I was useless. And so, the first morning I was tearing all the barcodes off all of my brand new shiny tools. And I think within the first couple of hours, it was abundantly clear that I did not have 10 years experience as a carpenter. And in fact, I remember the first morning, and one of the guys on this work site said, "Oh, Andy, after Smoko, can I get you to go and hang those architraves?" I said, "Yeah, mate, no worries. I'm all over it." I went out to find my mate and I said, "Andy, what's an architrave?" So, yeah, I was just faking it till I could make it.
Mm.
But that 3 months that I was working full time and just ticking along to keep the bills paid,
Mm.
um, I was really relieved to have a bit of income coming in because the business just hadn't grown, hasn't taken off like I hoped it would.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I did have a little bit of a nagging sense of shame that I had this passionate belief in what we could achieve, and I'd given up so quickly. And I don't think it was ever a guarantee that we'd ever start the business back up again. It just didn't. It felt hopeless.
Mm.
I started to realize why there was only a couple of solar companies in all of Gippsland because largely people just weren't
Mm.
invested. They didn't believe in this future. And in the end, I just got to spring 2011. I got a couple of phone calls. We made one or two sales with enough to just keep us ticking over. And I came home and I said to Cal, I have to do this. I have to quit the job. I need to fire the business up again. And when I do, we're going to die on this hill. We're going to succeed or we're going to go down swinging.
Mm.
Because I'll never be satisfied if I don't just see what we can do with this thing. And from that moment on, business just went gangbusters and obviously got to the point where it was one of the biggest employers in the country 10 years later.
In the country.
Of its kind. Yeah,
Mm.
one of the biggest employers in the renewable energy industry in Australia. We had at
Wow.
one stage, yeah, 2021, I think we had nearly 200 staff plus 130 contractors running around the country. So it just it went
Wow.
got much bigger than I ever expected in a very short period of time, and it was yeah, it's pretty incredible to think about. Um, for me, the thing that I reflect on is the opportunities it created for so many amazing people, particularly Gippslanders and people who haven't had to leave our hometown of Murbu North or are able to stay living in regional areas and get a good job with a good wage and build a
Yeah.
successful career and not
Yeah.
having to move up the line to the city. I think that's the legacy that our business will leave into this region.
Mm. Yeah. I've got that. Yeah, I've got two questions coming out of all this. How did you, like, when you knew you had to employ someone, what feelings did you have? Like, because you'd never been a boss before. You'd only been that worker who disagreed with all the bosses, and so now
Yeah,
you're
that's right.
sort of thinking, shit, I've got to put someone on. Like, how did you cope with that? Putting people on, and it wouldn't have just been like maybe you started with one, but then you would have quickly put on more. Like, does that hard?
Yeah, it's definitely the hardest part of the journey is making those first steps, building that sort of
Mm.
concrete in your business and it's making the commitment that, we have to make a sale each week, otherwise we can't pay the
Yeah,
wages. Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
that pressure is a lot to bear. And
Mm.
when I was working out of the home garage in Murbu North, if we didn't make a sale that week, like it was a concern, but it didn't really matter because we had some bills to pay and some
Yeah,
groceries and petrol and things like that. But we weren't going backwards at a great rate of knots. But all of a sudden, you have to make one sale a week just to pay that person's
yeah,
wage, and then you can start to tread water yourselves.
yeah.
And so that's hard because you have a couple of quiet weeks and you think, well, we're working really hard here and we're going backwards.
Mm.
And we're only talking backwards by a couple of $100 a week. And by the time our business grew to the size that I just mentioned before, we're turning over about, $40 million a year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so the scale was much, much more significant, but it's all relative. When you are a small
Yeah.
business, going backwards by $300 or $400 a week is actually the difference between, success and failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the banks wouldn't give me a credit card overdraft, or nobody would give us vehicle finance. Like they just laughed at us and said, "Come back when you got a few more runs on the board, young fella."
Oh.
So it's just and that's their prerogative in their businesses. But every week, someone was not taking us seriously and ridiculing, you know, what we thought we could be and didn't
Mm.
believe us. And I ended up using that as my fuel to prove people wrong. Um, but there's also a tendency sometimes for that to really kick you in the guts at times where you just think,
Mm.
why does no
Mm.
one feel like I can do this?
Yeah.
It's hard. And that's why we need to be better at mentoring and supporting startups, because
Mm.
you have those times at 2 o'clock in the morning where you're like, am I crazy to think
Yeah.
like, why
Yeah.
is no one been able to build a successful solar business in Gippsland? Maybe it's me that's delusional here.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, we're turning over tens of $1 millions a year. We were right, but there was a time it would have been very easy to give up.
Mm. When you were going back to that other question, which is relevant to this now, when you're talking about, when you started in Gippsland, Latrobe Valley was kind of like you were the devil, walking the streets of Gippsland because it's
Yeah,
such a big coal, coal towns, Latrobe Valley is full of coal mines. Um,
yeah.
what shifted? So, like when you're saying, at one stage you're the most hated man, walking around wanting to do this solar because that was just not what we do here. And then it suddenly boomed. I don't know if it suddenly boomed, but over 10 years it completely shifted around. What shifted? What do you think happened?
Well, the hardest period, we started our business in 2010.
Mm.
And the first 5 years was incredibly hard. There was no relief. There was never any tailwinds blowing our way. We had some feed-in tariffs from the government, which increased the return on investment if you put solar on the roof. We had some rebates and incentives to help lower the upfront cost. But just in general, compared to the cost of buying electricity from the grid, from coal-fired
Mm.
power stations and what have you, there was just no real reason for people to do it unless they cared about the environment or
Yeah,
sustainability in general.
yeah,
Which was it was fine in the area where I used to live in Northcote and Thornbury, in that inner green belt of Melbourne. Everyone did it because they're like, well, of course it's more expensive, but I'm creating a better planet for my children.
yeah, yeah,
And so moving from that environment with that mindset where everybody believed in this energy transition the same as I did, and then you move to Latrobe Valley, and it's just like this brick wall of inertia that just hits you. It's just so visceral and so instant, that
mm,
that feeling of who the hell are you to
mm,
tell us that the future is solar?
mm,
It was very confronting for people, and it really played on people's fear, uncertainty, and doubt when you have this jumped up little smarty pants from the green belt of Melbourne coming down and saying, "Sorry guys, but our future is not coal, our future is renewable." They just
yeah,
go, "Who the hell do you think you are?"
yeah,
And
yeah,
the fact that I had the wrong attitude for the first few years really just accelerated that. It really exacerbated those problems because I really did have my head up my own backside, and
mm,
it took me through good 3 or 4 years to realize that you have to stop and meet people where they are.
yeah,
And what I realized after a period of time is that everyone loves jobs. So the minute that I started changing my messaging about global warming or climate change,
yeah,
any of those things, and started talking about a new apprentice collecting their high vis for day one of a new career in renewables,
yeah,
everyone's like, "Hey, we love jobs." And
yeah,
all of a sudden, the council started supporting us, and businesses started getting behind us. And within a couple of years, by 2016 or 17, we were one of the larger employers in the Latrobe Valley. And I think that's really, we've proved through our deeds that we can actually be a net positive contributor to this region.
mm,
Um, but more importantly, even if there was no Gippsland Solar and no other solar companies employing these people, we would still be losing those jobs from the coal-fired power sector. It's not
yeah,
a zero-sum game here.
yeah, yeah,
And people still in the valley will relate the installation of a solar panel on the roof to putting their mate Joe out of a job at Loy Yang Power Station. Like I really still wrestle with that.
Mm.
And even the other day, I did another podcast with somebody. It was put online in on a Gippsland social media page,
Yeah.
and then someone said, "Why are you promoting solar down here? This is coal country. This is
Oh,
2024." It's
wow.
right. Do you know that you can have
Wow.
both? Like the energy
Yeah.
mix, it's called an energy mix for a reason, and we need to have all forms of energy. And
Yeah.
it's I just find it quite incredible that people still feel that way, and that businesses still want to put the solar panels on the back of their building so the customers can't see them because they find it really insulting or threatening or something like that. I'm like, guys, you need to move with the
Wow.
times. Yeah.
Wow. We've got solar panels. I love them. We don't have a battery yet, but and we haven't really had to have a battery yet, but every now and then the power goes down. It's like, damn, wish we had a battery.
Well, I can tell you, if you lived in Melbourne, North, Karen, you'd have a battery because the power goes out here half a dozen times a year for a meaningful amount of time.
Oh,
So,
does it?
yeah. And
Uh,
yeah, and
wow.
honestly, it doesn't always make financial sense for most people, but
Yep.
if you have an energy reliability issue, which a lot of people in Gippsland do,
Yep.
that's the largest motivator for people putting in battery storage.
Mm. I know I do agree with that because it is it does cost a lot to put in a battery, but if you're relying on it for business, then you're relying on power for business. That can cost that's very bloody costly to have your power
Yeah.
out. It's
And I think it's
yeah,
also more about self-sufficiency. So if you put solar
yeah,
on the roof and a battery in the house as well, you know that you can generate, store, and consume your own electricity, and nothing that the government does, that the private sector does to, to feed in tariffs or to energy tariffs, anything like that.
mm,
None of those things will affect you because your price of electricity is fixed
yeah,
out for 15, 20, or 25 years.
yeah,
So I think, a lot of the customers in Gippsland Solar were, people that were approaching retirement age, and they were looking to make investments that would secure their running costs
yeah,
into retirement when they're not going to have an income coming
yeah,
in.
yeah.
And I think it's the future proofing that's actually the largest driver, I guess, of people wanting to sort of make that
Mm.
investment now and get the benefits over a long period of time.
Mm, that makes sense. Our neighbours have got, they're all solar, like all solar. They're not even on the grid at all. And it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Every now and then they say, we can't do our washing in the winter, this horrible weekend in the winter. But, other than that, bloody good on them. Well, how important is a renewable? Like, I know you're talking about, fixing your foolproofing your future and I know all that sort of stuff. But how critical is it? Like, let's be really straight to the point. If we don't shift to renewable energy, what's where are we headed if we don't make that change?
Well, I think everyone would know that the grid is under an increasing amount of pressure.
Mm,
We are largely across the economy, we're electrifying everything.
mm,
It's clear that the government is wanting people to, the gas substitution roadmap, the electrification programs that are being rolled out. It's clear that the future is electric. I don't think
mm.
anyone would dispute that. The main point of contention is, where do we generate that
Yeah,
electricity
yeah,
from? I
yeah,
would think I hope that's the only part of the debate that still is live. Um, and when it's like they say about opinions, everyone's got one.
yeah.
There are people out there that are advocating for nuclear, and frankly, I reckon 15 years ago that was probably a discussion needed to be had. And
Mm,
I honestly, even though I'm a proponent of renewables, I think that the ban on nuclear way back in the day, maybe the Howard years, I think was a big mistake because it's worked for other countries.
mm.
But the problem is now we've gone so far down the renewable energy path. We're already across Victoria. We're already sitting at 50, 60, 70% renewables during certain times of day.
Oh,
In
are
South,
we? Mm, I
yep,
didn't know
yep,
that. Yeah, yeah,
yep, at certain times of day, certain months of the year, for example.
yeah.
In South Australia, they've already hit over 100% of their needs from renewable energy for many times, consecutive days, even
Wow.
through spring.
Yeah,
We already made those investments. And the one thing we know about nuclear, it is significantly more expensive than renewable energy, the
yeah,
levelized
yeah,
cost of electricity.
yeah.
Buying energy from nuclear is around about $220 a megawatt hour.
Yeah.
Solar can be generated for about a sixth of that.
Wow.
Um, so I believe that transition that we've made, it's clear now that we're moving down this path.
Yeah.
And the other problem with something like nuclear is that it creates baseload electricity. the only way to integrate 7 nuclear power plants into our electricity grid, as we've seen the proposal to do, is that you'd have to turn off people's solar systems at certain times during the day and curtail them and turn them down. And
Yeah.
as if consumers who've made these investments on solar
Yeah.
and battery storage on their houses would stand for that. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't have an ideological opposition to nuclear. I just think that the ship sailed. It took too long to get to this point,
Yeah.
and it will be 20 years before we're getting the full benefit of that. And it will push people's power prices up. So I just don't know why a sunburnt, windswept country like Australia would ever consider it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. But we're on the right path.
We
with
are.
with
We
with the
are.
with the well, I don't understand. I don't know enough about it. I'm a greenie. I don't want our planet to be fucked up. I do care about the kids' future, but I don't know enough about it. I worry about climate change. Still don't know enough about it, to
Yep.
truly get into the argument, other than why would we fuck the planet? Why would
Yeah.
we do that? I just
Yeah.
so that's
I
my big thing. I don't know
yeah.
why it happens or how it happens, but I don't want to fuck the planet. That's maybe
Yeah.
I'm
And I
saying
guess the reason why I've spent so long working in with people in the coal-fired power industry. I've toured the power stations. I've educated myself a lot on the various forms of energy,
mm,
coal and nuclear and wind, solar, gas, everything, is because I want to be able to take out the ideological debate. So I want to
mm,
say, I want to be able to talk to someone who doesn't give a shit about climate change,
yeah,
thinks it's bogus, won't make any difference to global temperatures.
yeah,
It's all just greenwashing, and say, completely remove the argument.
yeah,
I can say there is still an absolutely rock solid business case. Like it's
yeah,
common
yeah,
sense to make this transition, because it's the cheapest form of reliable electricity that we can provide.
yeah,
And the decentralization of our electricity system means that people installing solar and batteries on their own home is going to actually be the cheapest form of supplementing the grid that we can possibly find.
mm,
Um, so when you talk, so there's nuclear proponents that will say, "Oh, have a look at what they're doing in Canada or in other
yeah,
countries that have a higher density of population."
yeah,
They will, of course, that works for people with their population density, but the way that our population is dispersed, centralized power in a lot of ways doesn't actually make sense at all.
mm,
We need to make people more self-sufficient, because the amount of electricity that you lose in actually sending electricity out to people's homes and businesses across
yeah,
hundreds of kilometers, it just doesn't make sense. So I think that, it's all about horses for courses, and
mm,
our natural advantage is we have space,
yeah,
and we have wind, and we have sun
yeah,
resource. So we need to make the most of it, because that will be the cheapest form of electricity.
mm. Well, that's a good business case. I like that. That's it. That's take out the other stuff, but I like the ideal stuff anyway. But now
Well, so
tell
do
me.
I, but some other people don't agree. So
No,
you've got
I
to be able
know.
to, you can't
I
rely
know
on that argument.
that bugs me too, because I want to argue about it, but I don't have enough facts, and then I just think,
Yeah,
well, I'm just going to keep out of the argument. But I
yeah.
want to argue, but then I just think, well, I'm just going to lose anyway. What's the point? Now you've got your book, Here Comes the Sun. Why did you write that book? Have you got one there? Because I bloody hell,
Oh, I should have
I
brought a
haven't.
copy with me.
Yeah,
It's
I
sitting in the other
know.
room.
Uh,
I read it with my 12-year-old son the other night, actually, as I
yeah,
was saying to you before. So it's sitting on
yeah,
his bed at the moment.
yeah.
Um, well, after we sold our business to RECV and I fulfilled my 3-year contract there, I pretty much finished up on day one of my contract expiring. I didn't love the corporate world, and
Yeah,
with all greatest of respect to RECV, they treated me very well, but
yeah,
it just wasn't a world that I wanted to exist in.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and in the end, we decided to take a 6-month sabbatical, take the kids out of school and go and travel around the world and just give the kids some life experience.
Mm,
But what followed was a bit of an identity crisis, going, well, if I'm not Andy from Gippsland Solar anymore, like, who am I now?
yeah, yeah,
I've kind of shed my skin, but I don't actually know what my identity is without that.
yeah,
And a lot of founders go through that, where they just sort of
yeah.
have a bit of an identity crisis. So in the end, I'd actually started writing the book towards the end of my time at RACV. It was just really hard trying to grow the business so quickly through a period of COVID and lockdowns, and
Yeah.
I just it was hard. I wasn't sleeping very well. My mental health had suffered badly. I'd suffered significant setbacks over the years, and was in a bit of a dark place. And yeah, and someone convinced me to start journaling my thoughts, which sort of turned into kind of really just a chronological story of our business journey.
Yeah.
It was never designed to be published. It was really just a thing to help me to get my mental health back on track and to be able to have some sleep, put my head on the
Yeah.
pillow at night. And so in the end, I really just decided to write this book. And I was writing at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. It just became this obsession to finish the book. Um,
But you
and
knew it was a book by then. Yeah.
what's that?
You knew it was a book by then. Or
I think
yeah,
I think maybe in the back of my mind, I still didn't
yeah,
expect to publish it.
yeah,
But I did. I was sort of turning it into something that looked like a book.
yeah, yeah,
Once I got halfway through, I thought, well, maybe I will write this as a book, but
yeah,
really just in posterity for maybe for the kids to read and understand how mum and dad ended up where we
yeah,
are
yeah,
in life. And so by the time I finished the book, that was really all it was something that the kids could read or a bit of a just a something to capture our
yeah,
journey before I forgot about it and
yeah.
became old and senile. Um, and I got to the end and I sent it to a friend of mine, Kylie Miller, up in East Gippsland, who's a
Yeah,
published author.
yeah, I know, Kylie.
And,
Yeah.
and she came back and she said, "Shit, Andy, this is really good. You should send this to a publisher. Like it's really good." And I thought, well, I've done the work. All they do is say no. So I just went and found the best publisher I could find, a tier two publisher out of Melbourne called Affirm Press. And I subverted the submissions process. I emailed it directly to the CEO of Affirm Press with a Word document. And I said, sorry, not sorry for going around the process, the submission process. But here's my story. And if you like it and you want to chat, I'd love to hear from you. Just through a Hail Mary. And he got back to me 5 days later. And he said, mate, I've just read this whole thing cover to cover in one weekend. He goes, the world has to hear this story. And
Wow.
it was amazing because I had imposter syndrome even sending it to someone who receives 3,000 submissions a year.
Yeah,
I thought, who am I to think that my story is that interesting to someone who reads books multiple times a week?
yeah,
So when he came back to me with his experience and having to obviously make the decision to invest in publishing the book and told me this was a story that the world needed to hear, I thought, well, maybe it's not a pile of self-obsessed junk. So so yeah, that was it. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I will be a published author, and then signed the publishing deal and I spent 6 months editing the book and taking out all the stuff that the lawyers wouldn't allow me to leave in and things like um, and it was really like I've said multiple times that I consider myself to be an accidental author. It was never my intention. I thought it was an interesting story and I wanted to capture it for for my own
yeah,
interest
yeah,
sake. And he actually said to me that's the best kind of author that he wants to work with is ones that aren't doing it for money,
yeah,
they're not doing it for fame, they're not doing it for narcissism or
yeah,
anything like that.
yeah.
They just have a story they want to tell and pour their heart out onto the page, and that's what I did.
God, I love your, I don't know, I'm going to call it balls. I don't know what I want to call it. You're like, you just, the way you just go, I'm just going to give this a crack. I'm just going to do it. And I'm just going to go round. I love the way you just go round things oh, I don't know if you would go round or you go straight through the bloody middle. I'm not sure,
Well,
but
whatever gets results, Karen,
yeah.
like. But you know what's funny? Because when I sent it to him directly and ignored the submission process, he said, when I received your email, I thought, I bet that's the way the guy ran his business for 10 years. It's just,
And it's true.
yep. Everyone's knocking on the front door waiting for a meeting, and I just let myself in through the side with my own key.
Oh God, there's a book from Alex Banyan called the Third Door, and it's exactly that. It's like
Oh, okay.
everyone
That's not,
goes to the front door, everyone goes to the side door. He said, but you go around the back, and he said it's
yeah.
always the third door you knock on, and it's open because no one else is there. They're all banging on the other two. So such a
Well,
good book.
I
Yeah,
might have to read that because that's exactly the theory that I've deployed through my whole business life. Is
yeah,
there
it
is always
is.
there's an easier, more effective way to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah,
And I think it also weaves its way through the message of curiosity being so important in life. Like
yeah, yeah,
being curious and thinking, how can I find an easier way to achieve something? Like
yeah, yeah,
everyone thinks on rails and we're taught to
yeah,
learn on guardrails. And then
yeah.
often a lot of people that didn't finish school are the ones that go on and achieve incredible things because they're always thinking
Agree.
outside the square.
Yep.
And
I
that,
agree with that. I think don't, particularly kids at school with ADHD, I always think, Jesus, don't write them off because
yeah,
their brains are, it's like you, their brains are thinking in such a unique way that
yeah,
it's not bloody, it's a different way, but it's not different. It's not bad, but just because that's not exactly what you talk about the guardrails. It's frigging coming up with amazing ideas that no one else
yeah.
has thought of, and I think we're crazy that we don't tap into that stuff. It's
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of my best friends is a guy called Gus Belbonson. He was the executive director of Lonely Planet, and now he's a keynote presenter and a futurist.
yeah,
And he nails it when he says that we're always teaching kids you have to be more realistic. He's like,
yeah,
screw realistic, you be
yeah,
unrealistic.
yeah.
You know,
Agreed.
start with the biggest, most ambitious goal you can possibly think of and think,
Yeah,
why the hell can't I achieve that?
yeah,
And I don't blame the teachers necessarily. I think the system is just set up in such a way that we have
yeah,
to try and teach 25 kids the same sort of curriculum, and they
yeah,
don't have the bandwidth to expand beyond that.
yeah,
Um, but I do think, and that's the reason why we took our kids out of school for 6 months and went to the Middle East and did some really, really hardcore
mm,
travel and right out of the comfort zone, is because I want them to think more holistically about the world and their place in it.
yeah,
Because um, there's actually
yeah.
no limit on what any of us can achieve. We just need to believe in
No.
ourselves.
I agree, and what you said about the kids, that's why I wrote Magnificent Kids, and that was exactly for that reason. Like kids don't have a lid, they don't have a lid on their jar, and it's kind of like, oh, I think two of the kids were bloody like only I don't know 8 or 9 or something, and they went to the Vietnamese government and challenged them over
Yeah,
over rhino horn and shit like that. And they started TV
yeah.
shows when they were 7, and I just think stop, don't put lids on kids. It's
No.
just let them have their idea. The other thing you
Yeah,
said something else said too. Oh, go on. You're going to say something.
I think the world kind of knocks it out of kids. I think we all
I do
start
too.
with this. We start with this thing, this notion that the world's our oyster. I remember the first moment I realized that as a father, my boy Lockie, who's now 14, when he was 6 or 7, he just started doing Auskick footy,
Yeah.
AFL, and he slept in his Geelong jumper. Like he had the footy tucked up next to him, and he just loved footy. And for those, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with Patrick Dangerfield, who's an absolute star, won a Brownlow medal and whatever else.
Yeah.
And he was laying in bed one night, I tucked him in, and as I walked out and said goodnight, he goes, Dad, he goes, do you think I could be as good as Patrick Dangerfield? I was like, well, Patrick Dangerfield was probably no better than you when he was 6, but he was really he believed in himself. He was really committed. He trained hard.
Yeah.
He exercised. He focused on his diet. So
Yes.
you know what? There's actually no reason why he couldn't be as good as Patrick Dangerfield. And that to me was the insight into a 6-year-old's mind. Like he doesn't just love footy; he believes he can be Patrick Dangerfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like, let him believe it.
Oh,
It's
absolutely. Because as soon as we start saying, "Oh no," because they're elite sportsmen and they're this and they're that, no. I used to live next door to Gary Ablett's family parents, and she was the one that taught them footy. Like it was her. She would get out in the
yeah, right.
backyard kicking the footy with the boys. Wasn't the dad or it wasn't any superstar. It was mum out there telling them
Yeah.
you can be whatever you want. Kick the bloody ball, kick that bloody ball. That sort of
And then
stuff.
and look what they ended up.
Exactly. So I think,
Yeah.
and sorry to the Ablets if I'm speaking out of turn, but I mean, I just think you can be a superstar. It's the people around you that tell you the stories that stop you from being what you were born to be, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. And I often reflect on this when I'm doing presentations, when I talk to kids in schools. I've done a lot of
Mm.
work in schools where there's a little bit of disadvantage or kids that are slipping through the cracks.
Yep, yep,
And I always say to them, if to maybe a room of 15-year-olds, that I would have traded places with almost anyone in this room at 15 years old. I
yep,
had nothing going for me. I
yep,
hadn't finished year 10. I was living out of home. I didn't have any prospects, didn't have any money. There was nothing on paper that said that we'd go on to build one of the biggest employers in renewable energy in the country
yep,
and achieve the things we did.
yep.
But ultimately, my belief in what I could achieve was stronger than the force of people telling me that I couldn't do it.
Mm,
And that's just you can't overemphasize how important that is, that sense of belief and that's why for me now, talking to kids and showing them to open up their horizons is actually really important
Yeah,
because
yeah,
who knows, one of those kids might go on to achieve something absolutely incredible and change the world in some way because you've instilled in them the belief that they could do anything if they put their mind to it.
yeah. I love that. And I think there are so many what's the word? I don't know. So many ideas that have never come to life, because people have squashed them. It's
'Cause
so
the world
sad.
says yeah. I've
Yeah.
like one thing that I particularly enjoyed about writing the book was just the interactions that I have with people afterwards, like random
Mm.
strangers. Like some
Yeah.
guy came up to me at a conference and just gave me a hug and we just started talking and he just opened up like he never opened up before. A couple of days ago, a lady wrote me a letter and she wrote it to Andy McCarthy in Melbourne North. So she somehow just wrote it sent it to the town, and the town's like, oh, I know Andy lives down the road. So her letter arrived in my letterbox,
Wow.
and yeah, and she was an older lady. She was a grandma, and she just said, she goes, "I'm sorry, you can throw this in the bin. You can ignore it if you want, but I just felt compelled to write you a letter because I just read your book and listened to your ABC Conversations podcast." And she said, "I'm so struck by your belief in what you can achieve, and it's so inspiring." And then she went on to tell me about her grandson, who was in a fair bit of trouble with the law, and he also had ADHD. His mum had passed away when he was actually very young, before he became a teenager.
Oh,
And she's really worried about him. And she said, I
yeah.
know this is like a really inappropriate to even ask, but if you wouldn't mind just sending him a message or catching up with him for a coffee just to give him some inspiration, because he really needs to hear your story and to see
Yeah.
that he can achieve anything. And so, yeah, so I just flicked him a message and I said, hey, look, I got this letter from your grandma and I'd be happy to catch up with you for a coffee and see if I can help you with your career or work out what you want
Yeah.
to do with your life. And I just think if we all take an opportunity to pay that forward, I think that that is
Yeah.
what makes the world a wonderful place. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's that living life in the service of others. Like there's nothing that feels better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially when you're not doing it for a return of any kind. It's just
Yeah.
because it's just making the world a better place.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I love that stuff. Love that. Andy, I love you, actually. Just love you. It's
Mutual
amazing.
Appreciation Society, Karen.
Yeah,
I knew this would be a
I
good chat.
know. Isn't it wonderful?
We know,
Oh,
when you mentioned that we were going to do this podcast, and someone commented, "Oh my God, the two most excited people in Gippsland in the one podcast."
I didn't see that. That's bloody fantastic. I missed that comment. Oh shit, I need to find it. That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I think we've contained ourselves very well, actually.
we've done well, yes, but we have been very excited. It's been a very inspiring podcast, I reckon.
Yeah, you're just fantastic to talk to, Andy. I just love your grit, and I'm not one of these people that loves, all that grind and all that sort of stuff. But you've got this grit that it's not you're not actually telling people don't sleep, get up at 4, do your work. It's not that kind of grit. It's a grit that just sticks, and goes, well, you know what? I really want to achieve that. I'm going to find a way to bloody do it. I love that about you. I love
I
that.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Well,
love it.
yeah, I think in the early years, I certainly made that mistake. I was relentless, absolutely
Yeah,
relentless. And I did sacrifice a lot of things in my life for business success. And yeah, I think at one stage, I just learned to take a deep breath and to enjoy the journey. I think that's one thing that
yeah,
I taught myself along the way
yeah,
because like the world is such a beautiful place. And
yeah,
even when you fall down or you have the odd loss in business or something
yeah.
happens, it's really all just part of your story that needs to be experienced and help make you stronger and more resilient. It's,
Absolutely. It's just a
it's
splinter in your finger, isn't it? Really.
yeah,
It's, I agree with you. I think the world's. I think we underestimate how amazing this planet is. It just is. Just God, we're lucky. We're just
yeah,
really
yeah,
lucky, and we are lucky because we live in a good, great. I know. Gippsland with the coal stuff and everything else, but we really do live in a good part of the world, and we're very, very lucky. Really, really lucky.
yeah. I think the strength of our communities and the connectedness, I think, is
Yeah,
what I just love. And I'm sure someone might live in Burke or up in Mackay and they might feel the same about their community. But for
yeah,
me, the way that the community in Gippsland's just embraced us and
yeah,
we live in a town of 2,000 people and we are connected to everything in town. Like I'm the president of the
yeah,
football netball club.
yeah,
My wife's the chair of the development group. I coach the footy, cricket, and tennis.
yeah,
And our lives are absolutely intertwined within the
yeah.
community. And sometimes you get the tall poppy syndrome, especially when you run a large business. But I just wouldn't have life any other way because I go down to get milk and bread and it takes me an hour and a half to come home because it just start chatting to everyone and you know it's
That's,
it's it's what everyone should look for in a place to live is that sense of community where you feel like you belong.
I agree. And plus Murby North had all those storms and the whole bloody town was trashed, with trees. And I heard from many people how much of a help you were for so many people. I so many people told me, oh, buddy Andy is such a ripper. He's helping this one and he's helping that one. And like you were one of the key linchpins in that, in that whole thing. So
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like almost everyone was really. I mean, we were all so tired because for weeks,
yeah,
even the day after the storm came through, it was like 200k winds, this almost like a tornado that tore through the middle of
mm,
town and destroyed.
yeah,
I think it was 40 or 50 homes that were
yeah,
uninhabitable.
yeah.
And I just remember that I filled up my trailer full of chainsaws and rakes and all these bits and pieces and tools and just went driving around to see who I could help because
Yeah.
people were still trapped in their homes. It was that bad.
Wow.
And I just remember driving around the town, just hearing the sound of hundreds of chainsaws running, of everyone just doing what they had to do to help their community.
Mm,
And at our darkest hour, it was just nice to know that everyone just, put put everyone else ahead of themselves and just bandied together to help each other. And
mm,
that's what communities do. It's a beautiful thing when you see it in action.
yeah. That's a true community. Yeah. Not
Hmm.
not just talk. It's a bloody yeah,
Yeah.
in action. I love that. Andy, thank you very much for joining me. Where can people find you? Because
Well,
they should buy your book.
yes, the book is called Here Comes the Sun by Andy McCarthy. Available online and through all good bookstores, Karen.
Ah, love it.
But yeah, look, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you search for Andy McCarthy on LinkedIn, you'll probably see a picture of this sun or my
Yeah.
book on my profile picture. And by all means, if anyone wants to chat or connect or share ideas and vision for the future, then send me a message and let's talk.
Fantastic. And you've also got your website, andymccarthy.com.au.
Correct.
So just to mention it, like we
That's
do.
right. Among those
Yeah.
other things. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I've absolutely loved this. We need a coffee as well, and when we need one, we keep saying it, but too busy people never getting their heads together. But we need it.
Yeah.
We
It took us
do.
a while to get this conversation off and running, but it was worth the effort.
I know it did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully we won't leave it as long next time.
That'd be great. Nice to chat with you, Karen.
You too, Andy. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.